Training Camp 2020 in full swing for the New York Football Giants. It's another edition of Inside Training Camp presented by Quest Diagnostics. The stretching is underway. Bob Papa, two-time Super Bowl champion, Carl Banks. And Carl, every time you see the players on the field, you hear some music, you hear barking of coaches. It makes you believe more and more we'll get football this fall in the NFL.
Yeah, fingers crossed, Bob. And I love just this time of the year. And the fact that they're out there tells me that we're getting closer to a real kickoff.
All right, obviously Joe Judge and his staff have to make decisions on players and trying to figure out competition level. With no preseason games, what do they do maybe a little bit differently during these practices than you would if you had games to evaluate players?
Well, they have more time to teach, Bob, and that's great for a first-time head coach and a relatively young roster. Sure, you want to see the guys in competition, but you'd rather have these guys in some sort of cohesion, if you will. You want to know that they know what they're doing, so they have extra time to really teach fundamentals.
CO Shane Zimmerman, number 53, loosening up, and I think the Giants are expecting big things out of him. Number 30 is Darnay Holmes, the rookie out of UCLA. We're going to focus in on the cornerbacks and the DBs a little bit tonight, as voted upon by you, the fans, for this edition of Inside Training Camp, presented by Quest Diagnostics. But those are two young players that the Giants are hoping can be quote-unquote X factors.
Well, they are, Bob, and they're going to need as much help in the defensive backfield as possible. Xavier Mckinney wasn't drafted as high as he was not to be a contributor day one. Now, the thing is with him, we know that he can deal with complex schemes. He played for Nick Saban. The thing for him, if you listen to Jerome Henderson, his coach, is getting up to speed on the terminology, understanding the language of the defense. So he's going to be there. Darnay Holmes, another kid, he's got a ways to go. Now, let's not expect him to be hitting it out of the park right away, but they're smart kids. They played at a very high level of competition, and they're going to be asked to do a lot.
Yeah, I mean, and look, there's a void at that other cornerback position opposite of James Bradbury, who the Giants signed as a free agent. We all know, obviously, what's going on with DeAndre Baker being on the commissioner's exempt list. So it leaves open competition for other guys to sort of grab the job by the throat and just take advantage of the opportunity.
Well, it is. And another name that you should keep an eye on is a guy by the name of Corey Valentine. He's got the height, he's got the speed, he's got the range. Now that he has coaching and he's got, some turbulence behind him, he had some off-season issues last year. Now he's back. He's in a football frame of mind. I think you're going to see a lot of improvement and some big steps forward from him.
Yeah, and the Giant defense is in the white for so many years. The Giant defense in practice wore blue, but that's gotten shifted a little bit with new head coach Joe Judge. But, Carl, what is the drill that they're doing right here?
That's just a stab and shed, getting separation and getting off blocks. So you got to play with your hands. You don't want to get Velcroed on blocks. So every player on defense is required to do that because it's a contact sport, and they're going to all have to, in some way, some capacity, deal with blocks. And they've got to be able to shed those blocks and make tackles.
Carl, obviously with no preseason games where you don't get to do it for real, I would guess that the coaching and especially technique is imperative right now.
Yeah, and technique, like you said, it's imperative, Bob, but these are the moments where you simulate how your fundamentals are going to react under duress. And when you've got adversity, if you're sound in your fundamentals, you can always fall back on those.
We saw number 55, David Mayo, take a spin through there. He was a great find by the Giants last year when they had some injuries. And there you get a look at Ryan Connolly, who was so promising before he got hurt last year. But you can never have too much depth at your favorite position, linebacker.
No, you can't, Bob, but you need players at that position.
Like this guy, Blake Martinez.
Blake Martinez is a guy who's going to be a big contributor for them. But the guy I really need to step up is Lorenzo Carter. And I'm going to say this, I would say it to him as his big brother. I would say it to him if he were my son. It's now time for Lorenzo Carter to become a New York Giants linebacker. There have been a lot of players that have come through here and played the linebacker position, but very few have become New York Giant linebackers in the tradition of what a New York Giant linebacker is. Lorenzo Carter has the ability, he has the smarts. He's got to put it together and become a New York Giant linebacker, not a linebacker playing in a Giants uniform. And for those out there who know what New York Giant linebacker means, he's got to be that guy.
This is a really cool experience to get a chance to watch the team go through their practice. And, it's a little different, though, because, I saw fans mentioning, I hope that the Giants can, stream the practices like the Yankees stream the workouts. There's one big difference. In baseball, there's a guy at bat, there's a guy pitching, he takes a swing, they do a couple of simulated things. Certain things can't be shown for any of these teams because there is a secretive nature of football where you can't show everything because you don't want to be giving secrets, because every team has some young guys on their staff monitoring what every other team is doing.
Yeah, they look at every little thing, and it's called competitive edge, Bob, and you don't want to reveal anything about your personnel.
And there's Lorenzo Carter as they're working on some of the outside rushes. I think having Marcus Golden back is huge. It was a stroke of genius by the Giants using that very unique and special tag, and they wound up getting him back. But let's talk about Lorenzo Carter, because he's a guy that when he was drafted, from people outside of the organization that really studied it, they said the Giants got a steal in Lorenzo Carter. We've seen glimpses and bursts. Carl, what does he have to do to take the next step?
Well, he's got to commit, Bob, to every single practice play, sound fundamentals. The thing about Lorenzo Carter, and he gets a slight pass because I don't think this last staff was steeped in fundamentals. He was a guy that was relying on athletic ability, and that's why you saw the burst. But after that, he's got to want to take the next step to be a Giant linebacker. He can have an impact on this defense that no other player on this roster defensively can have, because he has a skill set that if he puts it together, he's got a great football IQ, but inconsistency does not get it done. He's got to be that guy.
All right, what are they doing right here, Carl? They got the ball. What are they trying to do right here?
Now they're now practicing ball position. Locate the ball carrier, shed the block outside of the hole so that you're free in the hole. If you throw your guy in the hole, you're going to trip over him trying to make a tackle.
And we just saw Lorenzo Carter pass through.
Stab and locate, shed, right in the hole.
There's Marcus Golden giving it a spin. Carl, I want to ask you about Patrick Graham, the defensive coordinator, and Joe Judge. And we know the lineage coming from a Bill Belichick and a Nick Saban, and having that in their background. It's something that you grew up in under Coach Belichick. As far as you talked about some of the players that are on the Giants right now, some of the young players that we've seen glimpses, but they haven't lived up to their billing. And there are a lot of people outside of this organization that thought when the Giants drafted guys like Will Hernandez and Lorenzo Carter that the Giants were getting a steal. Those guys haven't burst off the page yet. But the teaching component, there were things that maybe were lacking in the past that you know that this group will pay attention to.
Well, this group is all about teaching. Coach Colombo, I spoke with Bill Parcells on Sunday. Couldn't say enough great things about him.
He drafted him, right?
He drafted him, but he thinks he's a great teacher. He's going to get the most out of his players. You can see the level of intensity here. But their attention to detail will be something that jumps off the page right away. So whatever their talent level is, they're going to play to that every single play, because they're going to teach the fundamentals, and the players are going to be required, or I should say demanded, to execute those fundamentals and those teachings when they go out on the football field.
Yeah, and if guys have mental mistakes and they have to run an extra lap or two, as we saw on Monday, the coaches have to run too. So there's a whole different level of accountability.
Well, yeah, everybody's in it together. They're in this thing together, and I can tell you, having been coached by a guy like Al Groh, who can be a pain in the butt, but you everything he taught you, if you applied it, you were going to be a great player. And when coaches do their job, they expect players to do their job, and Joe Judge wants his coaches to be accountable for how their players play.
All right, so Carl, taking a look at these guys on the inside, and there was a look at Leonard Williams, and we saw Dexter Lawrence, the first in this set. Look, they've drafted some talented guys on the interior of the defensive line. What can they do to make this a strength of the football team?
Well, again, Bob, it's getting the most out of themselves every single practice play, because that'll carry over. And Sean Spencer, their defensive line coach, is an energetic guy. He brings the energy, and he expects that energy to be matched by his players. And he said something in his last interview. He said, I think Pat Traynor asked, how do you get guys to finish? He says, because if they're not finishing in practice, I'm sprinting with them to make sure, running right behind them to make sure they finish every single practice play.
Now, it's interesting. I'm thinking on the offensive line from your playing days, but I remember watching in the old Giant Stadium, watching practice, and your starting right tackle, Doug Riesenberg, would sprint 40 yards down the field on every play with the running back and run with him on every play as if he was finishing off a big run.
That's championship character, Bob, and you got to have that, because that pays off. When you practice good habits, they show up in a game. And Doug Riesenberg is a guy who would never give up. And he had the stamina, he had the endurance, but he had the mental endurance to do these things play after play after play.
All right, so what are they doing here with the DBs now, Carl? As we see James Bradbury, number 24, who's going to add a lot of stability to the secondary.
Again, you're looking at defensive backs going to be required to play with their hands. It's a contact sport. You're going to come into contact with people, and they're practicing their jams now, moving with the jams, quick feet, quick hands. And as you can see, Coach Henderson's teaching it. He's telling them why they should be doing this every time he does it. You can see he's coaching this drill. He's just not letting them hit it. He's telling them everything they need to do. Now watch him.
Christian Angulo, a rookie from Hampton, went next. Now here's Corey Valentine, who's going to have a great opportunity here with the team.
And Coach says he's a sponge for teaching. He loves to be coached. He says, Coach, teach me what I need to do to be a good player here.
All right, here's Darnay Holmes, the draft pick out of UCLA. And Carl, just rave reviews about him coming out of college.
Yeah, he's going to be a good player once he gets the speed of the game. And you can see it was the quick reaction drills there that they were coaching, and Henderson gives a head fake, and they want the guys to react and get back into play.
Obviously, he's smaller in stature, but he brings a lot of energy. He's a guy that can clearly help you out on special teams. And, with Joe Judge being the head coach, look, I know Tom Coughlin believed in special teams, and it won the Giants a lot of games, including Super Bowls. And Joe Judge comes from that background. Bill Belichick came from that background. I'm sure that is a detail that will not be left untouched.
It will not, and it's no surprise to me that in the back end of this draft, they got a lot of linebackers, Bob. You know why? Because if those guys are not every down 1, 2, 3 starters, they're going to be counted on to be starters on special teams.
All right, what are they doing here, Carl?
Playing the double team. They're feeling the double team. It's tight end and a wing back blocking down on you, and they're teaching them how to make contact and lean into the double team.
Okay, so that was Lorenzo Carter right there, getting his turn.
It's interesting. Coach Belima talked about this linebacker group, and he said there are no superstars, but they all come to work and they're blue-collar guys. If I'm a linebacker, I'm going to take that personal. He didn't mean it that way, but I think if I'm a guy like Lorenzo Carter, Marcus Golden, I want to show this guy that I can be a superstar.
See number 51, Kyler Frackerl, who the Giants signed as a free agent in his 5th year out of Utah State. He's another guy that brings a lot of experience. He brings depth. He's gotten a lot of snaps in, brings football IQ to the table.
Yeah, he does, Bob. And now he's a guy that, people know him as a pass rusher. But you hear the term cross-training all the time, right? Because he could be out there in non-pass rush situations, and he's got to know the techniques. Because What normally happens in the NFL, if you're a specialist, they're not going to accommodate you. They're going to give you things that you're not accustomed to doing. People thought Lawrence Taylor, oh, you just run at him, right? You had no luck running at Lawrence Taylor because he was the complete linebacker. Obviously, everyone knows that, but you have to know every technique. You're not a one-dimensional player in this system.
And Carl, is this something that, I mean, it's just, you got to go through this every day and just see it, and it has to become muscle memory?
It is, but it's muscle memory, not just seeing it, but doing it right. Footwork, hand placement, all of those things you have to do in order to make it muscle memory.
And obviously the Giants are looking for some impact play at the linebacker position because, Carl, this organization, this franchise, clearly has been known for linebackers for a long time. Not only your group with yourself and Lawrence Taylor, but, you know, Hall of Famer Sam Huff, and then you think of Jesse Armstead and Antonio Pierce
yes.
and what he was able to do. And even Michael Boley was
yes.
The Antonio Pierce for the Giants when they won Super Bowl 46. You've got to have linebackers that can make plays and not be liabilities.
That's exactly my point when I say it's time for him, meaning Carter, to become a giant linebacker. That means you're making plays. You're playing in the tradition of great linebackers, and he's got the skill set to do it. And one of the other terms that Coach Bielema used is linebacker DNA. Well, if we look at the DNA over the years, it's been weakened. They got to go back now and tap that strong linebacker DNA because it's no fault of players per se, but there was never an emphasis on linebacker play. They never drafted as if the linebacker position was important, and that's based on scheme sometimes. But that doesn't excuse the fact that your linebackers should be able to make plays. They're not just pieces out there. They've got to be able to have impact even if they're not your top draft choices.
And speaking of Jesse Armstead, he just jogged through your screen. Jesse always a presence with the Giants.
Yeah. You know, the teaching, you can see the teaching happening here. Guys are at full attention, but you got coaches that are explaining how things should work.
And they're not afraid to jump on guys either. I mean, this has been a very vocal training camp to this point as far as the noise level.
Well, the good news
they're not hugging it out.
Right. Well, the good news is it's a young team. And one of the things that Coach Judge said early on in terms of the guys he's drafting, he wants to know if they have the ability to take coaching and to be coached hard. And he talked about that specifically about McKinney, because he said he knows McKinney has been coached hard. He knows that he can be criticized. He knows that he'll respond to it. And this young group, they don't come in thinking they're entitled. They're coming in and there's a competition. So when you hear Coach Henderson talk about James Bradbury, he talks about competing. Not that it's a starting job. It may be assumed in the back of their head, but if he lays an egg, they won't hesitate to replace him with a player that's playing better.
And obviously, this secondary position and the opportunities that are going to exist there for players. Look, there's all kinds of chances for guys to make their mark in this secondary unit, and there is James Bradbury again, and he's going to be the leader of this group just based on his pedigree and what he's been able to accomplish. All right, what are they doing right here?
Getting the outside jam. Now, he missed it. You can see Coach Henderson teaching him. You got to get that outside arm. And, you know, the pad is the biggest part of it, not the helmet. You got to be able to have good hand placement. Now, you see they didn't let him go to the back of the line. They put him right back up there again. See, now the hand placement was better. So that's what they're teaching. You know, you're just not, when you line up in press coverage, and we see this a lot in a lot of bad defenses, Bob, they line up in press coverage and don't press. They don't get any contact. You don't pull your hands away, you put your hands on them, but so many teams will line up like they're playing man coverage and never touch the wide receiver. And that's going to be important because in this defense, they can be in a one shell and it can show three, or they can show man coverage, and you got to make it all look the same. So they want to make sure that they have consistency in every technique that they do, so a quarterback can't come to the line of scrimmage and say, well, He's lined up, but I think it's 3 because he doesn't jam.
And that's really an important thing. And Carl, so many times during the broadcast, when we're calling a game and the tight end is running up the seam wide open against the Giants, or receiver shakes free, and then the guy looks back, he was supposed to have help, and you'll point out during the broadcast, yeah, he was supposed to have help, but you were supposed to reroute him before that. You didn't give the help a chance.
Right, exactly. And you can see this is a very handsy defense. You can see they're getting jams when they're supposed to have jams, because when the defense calls for something, every part has a role. So if you don't jam, that means that tight end is running up the seam untouched, and it puts the safety in the bind if he's got a midpoint 1 and 2. So if you can disrupt, or as we call it, reroute, then if you can reroute, you give the safety a chance to see everything. And this is the one area of this football team that I love, are the safeties. This will give Coach Graham and Coach Judd so much flexibility. You got Julian Love, you got Xavier McKinney, you got guys who are smart, good football players. And the one thing that we hear most about Peppers is that he's just got to refine his technique.
Hope you're enjoying this look at Inside Training Camp presented by Quest Diagnostics. Bob Popple, along with 2-time Super Bowl champion Carl Banks at the Quest Diagnostics Training Center, giving you a look at individual drills on the field. We focused a lot on the Giants defense so far here this evening, but it really is fun to watch the teaching and the hands-on, because, look, Carl, there have been times when you and I have stood out there and we've watched stuff and we've heard coaches yell at players about, doing it, come on, do it, no. We see guys out there teaching, and that's a big factor.
Well, it's important to a guy like Will Hernandez, Bob, because raw talent, tough as can be, sometimes found himself out of sorts. That won't happen with Coach Colombo, because he comes from a Dallas Cowboy offensive line that was nearly flawless for years. I mean, they were mauling people, they were fundamentally sound, they were tough, and they were physical. A guy like Will Hernandez has those components. Now he's going to get the teaching to put it all together.
And now David Mayo at work. Let's see him in coverage.
I used to hate this drill, one-on-one.
With a running back?
With running backs, yeah. We used to try to duck back in line so we can get a fullback or something, because these running backs in space, it's tough to cover. That's good coverage there.
Yeah. Well, that was a tight end. It was a little bit.
It's okay. It's good coverage, though. We've seen
Xavier
everyone
McKinney on the coverage there.
Yeah. So safety on tight end, staying close.
Yeah, that's an unfriendly matchup when you got to deal with a back coming. Did you have to cover Meggett a lot in training camp?
Oh my God, it was like Christmas every day for him. I mean, we had one guy who could cover him, and that was Andy Hedden. Other than that, it was pitch and catch. I mean, you just hope to get close, or you knew that if you were in a coverage and you played outside technique and he didn't beat you outside, you were okay. It was going to be somebody else's fault in the game. But yeah, it's tough, man. Covering running backs in space as a linebacker can be tough.
But you know what? You just got to do your part, right? And here's where doing your part and using your technique is very important, because speed-wise, quickness, you're not going to be able to match up, but you can hedge your bet by doing it right and increase your chances.
And to the layman, if you look at a one-on-one drill, you say, boy, he just got beat to the inside really bad. You don't know, because the coaches will say, great job on outside technique, just close to your help. More so than you got to take both things away. It's impossible when you got a guy like Saquon Barkley.
Good to see Corey Coleman, number 19, back. Boy, he had a really nice camp last year before he injured his knee, which I think hurt the Giants' chances as far as some explosive plays down the field.
Yeah, he's a welcome addition to this wide receiver core. And the one thing about this receiving core, it's sneaky deep, Bob. If they stay healthy, they've got some options. Also good to see all the tight ends back as well. Evan Ingram was out with a foot injury, and he looks healthy and moving as smoothly as ever.
Getting a look at number 47, rookie linebacker Cam Brown out of Penn State, taken by the Giants in the 6th round of the draft, a Maryland native. Here's Corey Valentine at work.
Yes, that's good, really good coverage there.
Derek
Good
Dillon,
jam.
the wide receiver out of LSU, a free agent, beat him inside.
Well, he didn't beat him inside. The quarterback had all day to throw.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, he had good jam off the line of scrimmage, great trail technique. Yeah, you want him to finish that, but you know if there's a pass rush, he's not going to have that window to throw in.
Carl, right here, you know, you always hear about run fits. Is this a situation where that is something that has got to be drilled into players' heads as far as knowing their gap responsibilities? You see R.J. McIntosh, number 90.
Well, yeah, and this is the drill where it's very easy to get lazy, Bob, because, you know, you go, you stop. This is a drill where you want to have as violent of confrontation as possible to simulate game, and then once you get that separation, you burst to the football and then slow down. You don't want to lean on guys.
Spencer Pulley is the center in this sequence for the blue for the Giants offense. Never crazy about seeing bodies on the ground. All right, let's take a look at Darnay Holmes here in coverage against Benjamin Victor.
Got to get better body position there. He'll learn that. Good jam at the line of scrimmage. Now, Darnay Holmes is a guy, too, Bob, that they love as an outside or an inside guy because he's known to have quick burst. He's a quick burst, short area guy, so they trust him. Well, they hope to be able to trust him in the slot because he's got that short-range quickness.
So with Jabril Peppers and the Giants drafting Xavier McKinney, we saw Julian Love at safety last year. What kind of role do you see for Love?
It's going to be multiple, Bob, because, again, the configuration is not traditional because the offenses in the NFL can give you 4 wide receivers, 5 eligible wide receivers. So they're going to match up their personnel with the personnel that they see. So you won't see McKinney and Jabril Peppers lined up as traditional safeties. One guy might be at the line of scrimmage covering the tight end. Love may be your deep safety, and McKinney may be somewhere else. So it depends on how they see the matchup. So I wouldn't put too much thought into what his role is going to be. They'll find one for him, and it's going to be based on the personnel configuration of the offense.
All right, as I mentioned to you, unlike baseball where a guy stands on the mound and pitches and a guy stands at home and hits the ball and you say, wow, Aaron Judge hit that really far, pretty cool. This is football where what you do and what your calls are strategy. And now they're breaking out into the stuff that, well, you don't want to give the Pittsburgh Steelers an edge.
That's right.
So for Carl Banks, I'm Bob Papa and our entire crew. Thanks for watching Inside Training Camp, presented by Quest Diagnostics.